Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another message from Fountain Springs Church. My name is Kevin, and I'm on staff at FSC. I'm glad you're joining not just me, but our in-person and online locations worshiping God together. Today, we are going to hear last week's message from one of our pastors, and spoiler alert, it's been shortened a bit to be broadcasted here on your screen. If you want to listen to the whole message, go to our website at messages.fs.church to listen to it all. Again, we are glad you're joining us.
We are coming into a season that I really feel like we need to have a conversation about grief. And so here's where we're going to start with the statement: grief can ignite fear and confusion. And I think you heard it. When we have a moment, a season of life, when you lose someone, lose something, a failure, a moment where you begin to go, I have more questions than I have answers. The question why that gets unanswered and unanswered and unanswered and unanswered. When you and I walk through stuff that I would say is, well, sometimes paralyzing, we need to talk about it. Some of us are thinking, though, why is David talking about death right now? And I would tell you, that's not all I'm talking about. So I'll tell you a story here in a moment, but here, death isn't the only category for grief. Can we talk that? Some of us, it's not the loss of a person that we really care about. It's the loss of this was what I was going after, and that dream now is over. And you are grieved. That hurts you to remember when you got looked over for a promotion, or when someone rejected you, and you're like, I remember that moment, and you feel that. When what you considered to be, this is life, and then you went through a door, not your own choice, you went through a door and then everything's all different. All of a sudden, you don't have what you thought, what you hoped for, what you dreamt for. I want to tell you a danger that I'm seeing happen, okay? And then I'm going to try to pastor us through this. If we ignore our pain, we create more pain. And what I've been learning as a dad, that if I just ignore it, be like, you know what, I should be fine, he's good, all is well, then I should be, because he's fine, I should be fine. I'm just going to ignore this, I'm going to go whatever, spend my time doing this and that, and I'll just eventually get fine. Guess what? If I ignore what I'm actually feeling and walking through, what I can tell you as a pastor who's counseled a few people, I'm setting myself up for failure. I'm setting people up around me for failure. I am confident God has known about your pain and my pain as we've walked through new normals and grieving. Matthew 5:4 gives us an interesting take. Jesus is preaching a sermon and says, God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. If you don't know how to read the Bible, sometimes you read a verse, you're like, okay, that's neat. You need to read it backwards. Follow me on, don't worry, like not literally backwards, but if you want to be comforted in your pain, you're going to have to mourn it, which means you can't ignore it. If you want most of us, like in the midst of pain, we want comfort. That's why some of us will find something to numb it. We'll find something to help us ignore it. You want the comfort. If you want the comfort in the midst of current pain now or in the future, Jesus would say, I want to comfort you, but you're going to have to deal with it. Woo! Like, really, deal with it? Now, let me help you know a little bit about Jesus. Because Jesus was not only prophesied about, but we watch it play out, that he himself, he would walk through tons of grief. He'd walk through pain, abuse, betrayal, all the things that you and I gather grief and pain from, right? The stuff. And he would walk through that. Let me show you, because I think this is a big deal. He was despised and rejected. Think about the moments right now that you're like, that hurts so bad. Often, did someone say something to you or about you? Were you rejected in some way? A man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. We turned our backs on him. That will give you some pain and some grief. And look the other way. He was despised and we did not care. That was prophesied about Jesus. And I think we all would say, whoa. That was all a part of him eventually ending up on a cross. So we're going into, if you don't know this already, Thanksgiving. Some of you forgot about Thanksgiving and you've got all eyes on Christmas. And then New Year's. Let me take that all off your table real quick. You know what you've got right now on your table? Some of the most heightened time of the year of expectations right now. You have expectations you don't even know you have. Katie the other day, we usually put up 2 trees, a real one and a fake one. She's like, hey, what if we just do 1 tree? I was like, who are you? Before that moment, before she suggested, don't worry, we talked through it, we've worked through it, but before she suggested it, guess what I didn't know about myself? I'm a 2-tree guy. I had no idea. But I think it helps you and I understand that perhaps as we go into Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, and if you're single, you're like, no, I'm looking at Valentine's Day, and it's not looking bright right now. And you're like, do you understand how much expectation currently right now is on your table, which means you are vulnerable to not grief, but to not dealing with grief well. And I've studied the Bible. I've read it cover to cover. And let me tell you something about the Bible. God never suggests ignoring as a solution to grief. Can't find it. He never says, you know what you've gone through, yes, bad. What you need to do is don't think about it anymore. The reason I bring that up is that not one of our main tactics is to try to ignore it. In fact, I'll talk with people who are grieving, and one of the classic questions is, how long should I feel this way? Well, one, there's no timeline. But I would also tell you one of the tactics to not feel that way is to pretend like you don't feel that way. And I want you to see God's not asking you to ignore what you're feeling. Okay, not my notes, but let's do this. I think, this is opinion, I think our culture is so adverse to losing that we think it's the worst thing, so we deny it, reject it. I think that's a symptom that you and I don't grieve. We live in a culture now that says, well, you can't walk away with nothing. Here's a trophy that says really nothing. It's just that you showed up, but here you go. So you don't feel bad. But then it goes even further where perhaps you failed, you messed up at work, but instead of going, yeah, I had a horrible day, I did not do well, we blame the situations and the settings and the people around us. Do you see what we're doing? In fact, so much so that we're so adverse to trauma that we've become to highlight safety as the ultimate goal, where we say, hey, the best thing in life is safety. And why are we saying that? I think because we don't want to feel pain because we don't know what to do with it. So, rather than try to run from pain, which I'm not suggesting you and I wake up and say, God, would you bring the pain on? Bring it home. No. Perhaps a more mature prayer is, God, I wonder what I'm going to face today. Whatever it is, will you help me mourn it if I don't want to face it? In fact, evidence is given to us in Isaiah that Jesus came back in part due to this. Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord, this is prophesying about Jesus, is upon me, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted. If you're brokenhearted, don't be like, man, I shouldn't be feeling that way. I'm a Christian. Be positive. No, he came to comfort the brokenhearted, to proclaim the captives will be released and prisoners be freed. He sent me to tell those who mourn that the time of the Lord's favor has come, and with it the day of God's anger against their enemies. Do you see a bit of evidence in Scripture that God is not anti you and I dealing with stuff? He's the opposite, going, not only does he want us to deal with the stuff, he wants to help. So this is why you and I need to have this kind of pastoral, loving kind of sermon where you and I go into Thanksgiving, Christmas, and whatever holidays you got going on. Some of you are about to experience first. You know what I'm saying when I say first? First time without. You're like, what do I do? Well, I want to teach you what to do. I can't take your pain from you. I'm not going to try to numb it. But I can teach you what the Bible shows us. What do we do in the midst of all of this? Rather than run from pain, how do we deal with it? I'll take you to Isaiah. We're still in Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. It says, "It was in the year King Uzziah died that I saw the Lord." Now let me give you context because it's very significant. Isaiah writing about a year in his life in which the king died. If you don't know about the king of that time, the king dies what you and I would label a tragic death. He had followed the ways of God, but then got away of the ways of God, and then he was struck with a sickness, and it became like he died in a way that he wasn't supposed to. It was ugly, it was bad. It's what you and I would say, he died too soon and in a horrible way. So when the king died, you need to know it wasn't like, you know what? We're so high, better place, it's good, we were ready for this. No. It was unexpected and tragic. What we also know is that Isaiah there was some sort of relational component between the two of them where he highly respected the king. He knew the king in such a way that there was a heartbreak. It wasn't just like, well, I didn't like how he ran the kingdom anyway. No, there wasn't any. It was, this is grieving, this is painful, this is an issue. What we know is it greatly affected. This is why he's writing to you and I, helping us even get this understanding that, okay, I'm about to tell you something significant, but you need to know what's going on in my life when it happened. And what he details in chapter 6 starts off with going, when I was feeling a ton of pain. He's telling you and I, when I was grieving at a deep, deep level, I saw the Lord. Now, what's that mean? Again, if you read the whole chapter, what you're going to learn is the whole chapter is actually more about, let me tell you about when God called me. If you don't know what God called, like this? No. Like when God stepped into Isaiah's life and said, I have a mission for you. I have something I want you to do. And it was handed to him to be his messenger, where he was getting the assignment of actually being the person that God would say, share this with everybody. Share it. Say it. And he would be the messenger of God. He was called by God. You perhaps have experienced something similar where you had this day or this moment where you're like, I heard from God. He prompted me to say that, do that, or I had the experience with God. He's telling you and I got a calling from God in one of the toughest years of my life. If you're like, Pastor, just get to the point, okay. While grieving his earthly king, Isaiah stayed connected to his heavenly king. And I think that's a lesson that you and I need to spend the rest of our lives attached to. That while you are grieving, whatever you're grieving in the midst of your life, whatever you're walking through, that you and I in the midst of it feel it, experience it, we talk through it, we don't hide it. But we also don't run from God. What if God allows bad things to happen in our lives? Because he knows the potential that could actually come from it. What if that is one of the reasons? So I want to give you tactical stuff. For those of you who are note takers, you're like, tell me what to do. Okay, I'll write this down. For those of you who don't, learn to take notes anyways. But here, I'm going to share with you what I've learned, but that I share with anyone going in the midst of grief. It's very simple. There's 4 things, very, very simple. 1, what do I do? I want to give you something what to do. Look back. In the midst of your grief and your pain, don't stop looking back. Refuse to let the bad cancel the good. You will be tempted in the midst of your bad to let bad be the bigger monster. And you will start to think perhaps that only bad things happen to you, or why did God let this bad thing happen? At the same time, you're muting all of the good things that God has done. I'm not saying ignore the bad, but also do not ignore the good. It's intellectually honest for you to say, if I'm going to focus on the bad, I have to be honest and say there's also good. You're being dishonest if you're saying God only lets bad and you don't look for the good. Philippians 4:6. Don't worry about anything. You're like, does he know me? Like, don't worry about anything. Instead, if you're like, well, how do I not worry? Instead, pray about everything. There's, okay. So your logical question should be, okay, pray about everything. What should I pray about? Okay. I love how the Bible is actually very helpful. Tell God what you need. You don't even need me to explain that. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. What I love about that, it does not say thank him for what you hope he will do. Thank him for what he has done. Step 2, look around. Let yourself be included instead of secluded. Do you know what's going to be tempted of you? Like, you know what's going to be put in front of you anytime you face any kind of pain? Is to isolate, to seclude yourself. Now, I'm not suggesting, so I can't have any alone time. I want some alone time. No, that's fine. Unless it turns into complete seclusion, hours turn into weeks, which turn into months where you have no contact. You're not letting anyone in your life. No, that's where you get an alarm. It should go off going, oh no, I'm not actually mourning my grief. I'm running from it. The story in the Bible, we call it the book of Job. It's a story about a guy's life that is horribly tragic. You can read it. It won't take you long to find the tragedy. Watch this, though. When 3 of Job's friends heard of the tragedy he had suffered, they got together and traveled from their homes to comfort and console him. Now, you should wonder, because we got 2 camps going on. Does Job let him in the house? And I wonder what they said to him. Because many of us do that. Like if you're around someone who's in the midst of pain and grief, you're like, what do I say? How do I fix it? Some of us are like, I don't want to talk to anyone because I don't want anyone trying to fix my problems. Verses 12 through 13 are helpful, I think. When they saw Job from a distance, they scarcely recognized them. Wailing loudly, they tore their robes and threw dust into the air over their heads to show their grief. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and nights. 7 days and nights. No one said a word to Job. No one said a word. I'm tempted to make you read this out loud, but no one said a word. Some of us don't know what to do for the people around us because we feel like we don't have the miracle words. Maybe that's God making sure you don't say anything. This past week, one of our Fountain Springers, we did his funeral. You likely were not there. I can tell you that there obviously were family, but do you know there were friends there as well? Let me tell you a little bit about the friends. They were friends that had been actively doing things at Gary's house, helping repair and take care of things, helping get involved in things that he could no longer do. And one of the beautiful things about what's going on in that family's life is they're choosing to not be secluded even though it hurts so bad. In the midst of your pain, whatever you are right now grieving, do not choose isolation. One of the greatest gifts that Jesus designed in the church was to give you people. One of the greatest temptations the devil's going to try to do is take your people from you. And he's going to use grief to do it. Don't choose seclusion. Let me show you another one. It's very difficult. Look ahead. Someone's like, what? It sounds like we're ignoring the current situation. But let potential have a seat at your table. Let potential have a seat at your table. Here's what happens when you and I experience pain. We don't realize, we subconsciously take a chair from our table, and it's no longer there anymore. You and I will call it that person, or it was that job, or that opportunity, that dream, that hope, that whatever. You like remove that, but what you've done is you've actually removed the seat for good potential. You've said that There's so much wrong going on that I'm not sure I can do anything anymore. This is why a lot of people in the midst of grief stop doing things, stop celebrating, stop getting together. They stop so many good and healthy things. Isaiah gives us some help here. But forget all that. It is nothing compared to what I'm going to do. This is why I tell you this is so tough. For I'm about to do something new. See, I've already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. It's trying to give you and I help that, hey, I know you feel like you're walking in the wilderness. You are walking in the wilderness. But guess what God can do in the wilderness? He can grow. There's a story that examples this. When you and I remove that seat from our table of potential, we become very angry people. The story is of a mom, Carissa Smith. Carissa Smith, real story, really happened. Carissa Smith decides to go on that particular day to the library, and she's going to take her 4-month-old daughter. Now, if you've never met a 4-month-old, one thing you need to know about them is they're loud. It's just what they do. They're experts at being loud. Loud when you don't want them to be. Not always like bad screaming, but just they don't know what inside talk is. They just, that's scream. So she goes to the library. Her intention is to get some books to read to her daughter, but also for herself. So she's in an aisle. She sets the 4-month-old down, and she's just looking and looking and looking. And guess what? The 4-month-old, her daughter, starts to be, they're in a library, breaks the library rules. Can you believe that? Breaks the library rules, and just starts laughing and giggling super loud. Now, she's a mom of a 4-month-old. She's like, this is about a standard. In fact, I'm not sure she even heard it, right? But someone did, and this is a real story, so I'll give you the quote verbatim. A gentleman, I don't know if I would call him a gentleman at the time, but he says out loud, "Tell that kid to shut up or I will." Ooh. Some of you are like, where did this happen and what is his address? Really happened. Really said that. Like, did they know it? No, they don't know each other. Don't start putting in facts that aren't facts. This kid in a library is being loud, and this guy says, "Tell your kid to shut up or I will." Think about what your response would be. Mine get me fired. But here's what she says, because you need to hear her words. She says to this guy, "I'm very sorry for whatever your life has caused. What in your life caused you to do so and has disturbed you by being so mad at my happy baby, but I will not tell my baby to shut up, and I will not let you do so either." She probably said other things that didn't get put into print, but she's like, "You can't tell my baby to shut up. I'm not going to tell my baby to shut up. I want to tell you shut up." Right? She says that to him. Think about how. Don't dismiss yourself from the awkward moment. You're in a library. A kid was happy, screaming, sure, loud, fine. And then all of a sudden, this grown man, I would estimate probably around 70 to 75 years old, out loud, "Tell your baby, shut up or I will." And you got awkward. Now she's like, "No." And they're like, "You got me? You're in a library." They're like, "This is awkward." She confronts him like, "I told you what she said." I wonder if you're wondering what he did. He sat down and began to weep. Just weep. Well, now, even though Carissa was in the right, he's starting to like, oh, what do I do? So the way she tells the story is, she grabs her daughter, sets her daughter closer to the guy. She sits next to the guy and says, "What's going on?" And the guy, in the midst of his tears, says, "What's going on?" He says that over 50 years ago, he lost his 2-month-old son. And he lost control of his anger, and he was sorry. It was just stirring up too much in him. It's amazing what we don't know what's really going on in the life of someone. What's crazy is what happens next. Because some of you are like, "I wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have done that, wouldn't have done that." 4-month-old daughter. You know 4-month-olds, they're loud, right? You know they're not bitter. She doesn't know that she was in essence told to shut up or what was told. So she's kind of eyeing this guy that's crying. A 4-month-old kind of feels that a little bit. Gets closer and closer to him. To the point that he says and asks permission, "Can I hold her?" And again, I know some of you you would have been like, "Nope." She lets him pick her up. And he just holds her. He stops sobbing. Starts smiling. And the way the story ends is at some point, he hands the child back and simply says thank you and gets up and leaves the library. That is an example of a guy, true story, that at some point let grief remove potential from the table. And I wonder if it's done the same to you. That's why we have to have this talk. So one last thing. Obviously, you know where I'm going to go. Look to God. This is what many of us don't do. No one understands you or your pain better, I promise you. Lamentations 3:25 gives us great direction. The Lord is good to those who depend on him, to those who search for him. In the midst of your pain, don't remove dependence and don't stop searching. It's okay to ask questions, to even have doubts, concerns, thoughts. Very significant. What a tough sermon. But perhaps it's the ointment that God intended to answer your prayer with. As you have been lamenting what you don't have, who you don't have, where you aren't, what has changed, what seems different, and you're like, what do I do with this? Don't ignore it. Pay attention to where you look.
We're so glad you tuned in today. Fountain Springs Church is located in the Black Hills of South Dakota, but our community reaches beyond our neighborhoods and spreads around the whole world. Our website is a great way to give, get involved, and get connected. If you appreciate our ministry and want to be part of our mission to show people who Jesus is, here's what I recommend. Join us financially. When you do that, you're giving other people the opportunity to hear what you just heard. So here's a way to do that. Visit our website at fs.church/give. And thank you so much for being with us today. And let's do our best this week to show people who Jesus is.